So we're going to begin, like I said, momentarily, but we want to hear from everyone. Please, please, please feel free to share your information in the chat. We want to know like what type of nonprofits you have. Like today's discussion focuses on nonprofit growth by getting our taxes in order. And I myself am a nonprofit, so I'm really excited for today's discussion. Patricia Hoggart, she's an amazing tax preparer who I've used since I've literally started my nonprofit organization, and we connected through the County of San Diego Black Chamber of Commerce. They had a workshop, and Patricia led that workshop on behalf of H&R Block, and so I'm happy for her to be participating in today's workshop and leading it as well. So I see. Senior Social Organization, Don Ashley. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get our presentation started. Give me a moment. Let's see. All right. Can everyone see my screen okay? Wonderful. All right. All right, so today we have our workshop, Getting Ahead on the 2025 Tax Season. And this is a two-part workshop series. The first today focuses on nonprofits. And then in a couple weeks, we're going to have Patricia return, and she's going to share a little bit different information for small businesses. And just a disclaimer, this workshop is intended for educational purposes only and does not constitute tax, legal, or financial advice. The information provided is general in nature and may not apply to everyone's nonprofit specifically. We recommend consulting with a qualified tax professional, accountant, legal advisor, someone like Patricia to address any specific tax or legal concerns. Further, you can also use your research to determine the use of online resources. While we strive to ensure the accuracy of information provided, our company assumes no liability for actions taken based on workshop content. And now at this time, I want to give the floor to Director of Project M.O.S.T and Director, Founder of the Prep Institute to share more about what exactly is Project M.O.S.T. Natasha?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Really quickly, because I don't want to take time away from Patricia, the County of San Diego is very concerned about the growth of small nonprofit organizations. And because of that, they created Project M.O.S.T. This is an extension of a 5-year beta test where we worked with the county to figure out what are the type of training programs, what are the type of support, technical assistance the small nonprofits need in order to be able to grow. And that is what Project M.O.S.T simply is about, helping you grow. Uniquely intertwined with that is what we call the Grow Up workshops. These are workshops that we facilitate in order to be able to bring the entire community together to talk more about how we grow together and to provide the practical skills that you need to grow. And a unique component of that is our talkback feature. And you'll experience that with Patricia today. We spend the last 30 minutes just talking with you, listening to your concerns, trying to help you find the answers to your questions. So again, collectively between Black Tech Link, the Prep Institute, and the county, we are leading the charge on growing small nonprofits in San Diego. So thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, Natasha. And as Natasha mentioned, for Project M.O.S.T, we're a program partner and we facilitate these workshops that you see in partnership with the Prep Institute. A lot of the speakers that participate, provide their expertise, are part of the Black Tech Link Network, and we're excited to offer those services for this program. We work with also Rise San Diego, who does marketing and outreach for the program. And then the Prep Institute provides their oversight, direction, and management of the program, and they also provide technical assistance. So if you want to chat more about how you can grow your business, I encourage you to reach out to Natasha and their team at the Prep Institute, who can provide one-on-one consultation. And they also have an incubator and where they have a cohort of small businesses and nonprofits, which they support year round. Now, I'd love to give the floor to Patricia. As I mentioned before, Patricia is a seasoned tax advisor at H&R Block. She's my tax advisor, my go-to, and I love working with her because she's very thorough, I like to say, and she makes sure that I am thorough, which is very hard sometimes for nonprofit owners. We wear many hats, and so it's great to have someone in my corner to kind of like help and provide like financial advice, oversight, and she asks the questions that sometimes I may not know to ask and or may oversee. So Patricia, do you want to go ahead and share a little bit more about yourself? I think you're on mute, Patricia.
Because I was making weird noises and clearing my throat. Okay. Thank you guys all for attending the seminar today. I'm excited and nervous at the same time, even though I can sit and talk to you one-on-one about taxes for a long time. Somehow presenting to many people is just a little challenge for me. So with that, I'll introduce myself. I have been working for H&R Block for a short term of 21 years, part-time seasonal. It started off as just some way to increase my income, but also to increase some of the volunteer work I had already been doing. Taxes have come a long way. I started when we were doing everything on pencil and paper. So that lets you know how long I've been doing this. My professional career spans the last, oh goodness, 40 plus years in tax planning, reviewing returns, bookkeeping, all sorts of things there. So the bottom line is that if I don't have the answer on the top of my head right now, I can probably find it for you. So with that, we can go ahead and get started. I'm interested to see what questions you have specifically. I've reviewed the presentation today. So we've got a lot of information, but also we want to make sure that it is applicable to some of the questions that you have are answered. So with that, Elizabeth, go ahead. Next slide. I want to start with this one. I want to say the term tax time strikes the fear into the hearts of many people, individuals, businesses. As soon as if I even mentioned that I used to work for a tax agency, hands go up in the air like, oh, wait a minute, not me, not me. And I want to let you know that my goal here, part of my personal goal here today, is to erase or reduce some of that fear that you might have. Taxes are simply just the government's way of just putting things in check and making sure things are going the way that they're supposed to. Now, when it comes to a nonprofit, it says tax forms, but you know what? Really, from the IRS 990 and the Franchise Tax Board 199, they're just information returns because you don't pay any taxes as a result of any bottom line on the form. So your goal in filing the forms is just saying, hey, look, I've done my job. I've shared my story for the year. Right? And that's what those forms are. The RRF1 is a new form, basically that's it's registration with the Attorney General's Charities Office. And registration is required by any company that's soliciting funds from the general public. The government wants to make sure that when people are soliciting funds, that those funds are used for the purpose for which your nonprofit was designed for. Next slide. Now, what is a 990 form? There's a couple of things. Now, the 990 form, it's a general form. It's part of your annual reporting. The other thing that's different than the personal return is that this is open to the general public. Your form and your information on this form is open for public inspection. And you're required to allow that and to keep those forms for 3 years from the date the return is due. It's due on the 15th day of the 5th month. So if you're on a calendar year, that's May 15th of each year. You can file for a 6-month extension if you're not quite ready, and that's Form 8868. Next slide. Now, before I get into why it's important, I want you to let you know that, first of all, you can only file this 990 if you've been recognized by the Internal Revenue Service as a tax exempt organization, which means that you've gone through the process of submitting the application to a couple of things. I will just back up a tiny bit. That one, your first move is going to be organized as a corporation in the state of California at the Secretary of State as a tax exempt organization. That's just registration with the state of California. That does not give you any kind of tax exemption. Your next move is to get a federal tax ID number from the Internal Revenue Service, then apply for your nonprofit status. What the federal government then does, they look at your application, they say, okay, yes, you qualify, they issue the exemption. Once you get the exemption from the federal government, then you can apply to California for nonprofit status. Now, if you've gotten your exemption from the federal government, but not from California, then you're going to need to do that. It's always easier to do that after the feds because they'll ask you for the copy and all that. Right, that's done. Then the next move now, you're going to say, okay, well, it's important. Now you get to file the 990. The Internal Revenue Service is crazy about making sure that the correct form is being filed for the correct entity. So if they find for any reason that you're not is not nonprofit, that they're going to send you a letter saying, I'm sorry, we can't accept this return. So that's why making sure that you're actually nonprofit, and two, making sure that that's with both federal and state. It's important because it provides the public and the IRS information about how you run your program and what transactions you had. It tells your revenues and expenses, what assets you have. And again, it allows for you to tell your story in a way that if you organize, let's say, for example, you organize your nonprofit for feeding the hungry, or say providing employment training for people, then they want to know, okay, how much money did you receive for that purpose and how did you spend the money? So again, you're looking at transactions, revenues and expenses, and assets have more to do with what you own, how much money you have in the bank, whether you own a building, whether you own vehicles, whether you own any other property or equipment or anything like that. Now, the donors have the right to go in and review your 990 information. Now, you can also find that your 990 information on the IRS website. So if you had a question about a nonprofit, you simply go into the IRS website, search nonprofits, And you should be able to find, if you can't find the nonprofit there, then then it's not nonprofit, according to the Internal Revenue Service. It contains narrative portions about why the organization was why it was organized, what it actually does, what kind of activities were carried out through the year. Next slide. Now, the next question is, okay, now I'm exempt. I know I'm exempt. Which form do I file? The smaller nonprofits. So if you're just starting out, or if you're a smaller nonprofit, then it's the 990N, which is a postcard. You simply, now the 990N, you can only file online for the current year, whatever the current year might be, whether it's a fiscal or calendar year. If you have less than $50,000 in annual revenue, it's a postcard. If you have more than 50,000, okay, and this is revenue. I'm gonna also let you know annual revenue. That's not bottom line. That's not income minus expenses. That's how much money comes in, how much cash comes in to your company. If it's more than $50,000 a year, and then you own property of less than 500,000, then you can file the form 990EZ. Or if you're really, feeling great and you want to file the longer form, then you can. You have the option of doing that. Now, the 990 itself, that's for annual revenue of more than 200,000 or assets more than 500,000, then you must file the 990. Next slide. Okay, common pitfalls. Now, understand that the first thing that's going to happen is that if you file a 990EZ or a full 990, if the Internal Revenue has a question about what's on the form, they're definitely going to contact you and say, hey, you need to explain whatever's missing. Normally, the biggest pitfall is filing late. Now the late, and yes, just like on your personal taxes, if you file late, then you're going to pay some penalties. Now, and then the failure to file timely penalty depends on what your gross receipts are. So if you received $1,300,000 in donations for the year, guess what? Then your penalty is going to, if you receive $1.3 million, your penalty is going to be $100 per day, up to, and at that rate, up to something like $51,000 per tax return. And if you're a nonprofit, that's a lot of money to come out of your program income simply for filing late. If you have gross receipts of under $1 million, then it's $20 a day. Now, there is a maximum penalty, and that's up to $12,000 or 5% of your income, whichever is less. So it pays that even if you find out you're going to file late, then go ahead and file rather than delaying it. Now, I want to let you know something else about the late file penalties. You can request in writing that penalty be abated, which means that the Internal Revenue Service says, okay, your return was late. You had a great reason for it being late, so we're not going to assess the penalty, but that request has to be in writing. I do recall a nonprofit that I worked with that was late, and they were sent a penalty of something like $5,000. And at that point, we drafted a letter, and their situation was a little different. They had some crazy some things going on with the entity that did not allow for them to file timely. And so once you request it in writing, the Internal Revenue grants it. But sometimes they may not. But guess what? Even if you file late and they don't grant your abatement, then you can still appeal that to the Internal Revenue Service Independent Office of Appeals. But you have to do that in writing within 30 days after the denial. And then, of course, if you don't get the penalty abated and they don't reverse the denial for the abatement, then you can always discuss payment plans. But the biggest way to get to this place and not have to have this problem is to file on time. Next slide. All right, now we're going to cover steps to getting ahead on your taxes. The first thing is that you've got to start someplace. So the best place is that get help. Reach out to Natasha or me if you need help preparing. You want to make sure that you review your tax exempt status. The Franchise Tax Board actually has, if you go to the state of California, and I'll give you here, I can read this. Can you type this in the chat, Elizabeth, as I'm speaking it?
Yes.
Okay, it's https://www.ftb.ca/business/types/charities-nonprofits. So if you, or either the other way is to simply go Franchise Tax Board Nonprofits in the website and it pops up. Step number 3. Yes, that's the page. And we'll get to the other part. Yeah, the first part, check your account status there. And then you have filing requirements underneath that. And then it also has help. And actually that particular website is a great resource. Step number 3 is knowing when your taxes are due. So it's one thing to know when they're due. It's another to get your records together to do that. Step number 4 is there's a Cal nonprofits checklist. So if you will go to that. And that will let you know, it talks about delinquencies and then help for it answers pretty much, and it's in general terms rather than legalese. Excuse me. Okay. All right. Now, let's see here. Annual registration fee is with the Secretary of State. Now, I want to say something about, I'm sorry, the annual registration fee is with the Department of Justice. The exempt organization annual information return, I'm sorry, that's the $199. And then there is also a statement of information that needs to be filed every other year with the Secretary of State to maintain your corporate name and status. And all of that can be done online.
Yeah,
Excuse
I think,
me.
Elizabeth, does everybody receive the presentation, correct?
Yes, they do.
So all of you all have access to the presentation, and in the presentation are the links to these pages.
Okay. Go back to that slide we were on there, Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, before the return can be done, step number 5 is financial statements, your program documents, and all of your other organizational items. In order to prepare the return, I'm going to be looking for, as your tax professional, I'm going to be looking for income and expenses, any donations, anything that you receive there. And then this has more to do with filing the 990. It asks for who the officers are. It asks for how much time that they spend with the, how much time, if there are any salaries, if there's time spent with, how much time is spent with the organization. It wants to know major programs and all of that. Now, I want to do a quick segue, a slight segue, that in order to provide the financial information to your tax professional to do the return, let's talk a second about books and records. Now, as a nonprofit, you can keep your books and records, which is recording of any money going in, money coming out of the organization. You can keep those books and records in any way that is comfortable for you. However, when it comes time for your tax preparation or your return preparation, then all of that needs to be organized in a condensed manner where your tax professional is not going through a bunch of papers or anything like that. So one sheet of paper that basically is telling the story of what's going on with your company financially. Therefore, again, computerized systems, some people use QuickBooks, there's a bunch of things that are out there, and you can use whatever you're comfortable with. I also want to say that also with regard to this, that even though you're not subject to income tax, there are some some taxes that you are required to take care of. If you have any employees, you're still responsible for employment taxes. If you have any subcontractors, you're still responsible for 1099 forms for those subcontractors. If somebody's on payroll and you're paying them a salary, you're required to register with EDD for the employment taxes and the withholding for that. And also issue W-2s at the end of the year and to maintain W-4s. If you have subcontractors, any person that you pay $600 or more over the course of the year, they're required to have a 1099. And then you have to file those with the government at the end of the year. Generally, the deadline for those, for the W-2s and 1099s, especially the 1099 NEC, is January 31st. And there are penalties for not filing those on time. So you have those because that's generally a question on the return. You're going to pull your documents. You're going to go through all of your income, all of your expenses. You're going to say, okay, wait a minute now. The 990 form asks for highlights of your program. It's going to ask for the 3 top events that you did, the 3 top programs that you did for the year. It's going to ask what that was, what the results were, what the income was, and what the expenses were, and what the source of those events were. So you need to also be prepared to have that. You're going to file on time. Either you're going to file on time or you're going to file an extension. And then you're going to go ahead and take a look at what we have available for the next year to get ready. Look at, okay, well, what did we do this year? And then what can we do better next year? Are there any questions from any of the attendees at this point? Okay, next slide. All right, we can, do you want to open up for the talk back now?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that information. Um, right now, before we jump into the talk back, I kind of want to provide a survey link for everyone. And, this talk back segment, I really like it because this is a great opportunity for everyone who's on board to really pick Patricia's brain, and ask her those questions specifically pertaining to your nonprofit. She may not necessarily have all the answers, and that would be it would be a great time to like connect with her afterwards. But we definitely want to use this time to like ask any specific questions. And what we're going to do is we're going to invite everyone into the presentation, the chat, to kind of participate. So you will be getting an invite. Let's see. All right, wonderful. So everyone has been invited. But before we begin, I have put in the chat the survey for today's workshop. So please go ahead and complete that. And then I also wanted to share, like, as we're doing talkback, these are some of the resources. And, as a nonprofit, organization, myself, like, I really want to hear from everyone, like, what has been some of the challenges you might have faced, with filing your taxes. I think for me, one of the first issues that I ran in was like when I first started my nonprofit, I did an off calendar year, right? From
Oh,
January, from June, you remember that? From June to July, or July to June. And then, you know, Patricia told me I should change it to a regular calendar year. And that created a whole slew of issues with the IRS and the Attorney General and the Franchise Tax Board, where I did, get some penalties, but I appreciate Patricia helping me through that. Did anyone else want to share any challenges, any resources that are good for other nonprofits that may be looking to file?
Elizabeth, I
Mhm.
have one other resource that they can use.
Okay.
It's called stayexempt.irs.gov.
Stayexempt.irs. I'm gonna put that in the chat.
Yes,
Stayexempt.irs.gov.
right. If you go to that, now there are PowerPoint presentation. There are actually presentations or mini workshops, if you will, that they can go through, and it actually has some learning tools and answers some questions about some things.
There we go. Mhm. I see Alex, Dawn, Adriana, Linda, Renee on the call, Jaden. Um, what has been your biggest challenges with filing taxes? Adriana.
So we actually were late on our taxes this year. And it caused us to fall into delinquent status. And that was really difficult to overcome because we weren't sure if when we did mail our taxes afterwards, we weren't sure if they received them, did they get everything? And so they're not easy to communicate with. They have an email and they'll maybe answer it if they feel like they want to answer you. But we had very difficult time communicating with them. Um, Luckily, we were able to get into good standing with them. But I had a question about the extension. When you file an extension, is it automatic or do they send you a letter? Like, how does that work? Because I know we're
It's
gonna have to do that this year.
right. It's automatic. It's generally automatic. You don't, they don't respond and say, hey, by the way, you're okay with your extension. Here, in my suggestion, you said you weren't sure if they received it when you mailed it. My suggestion is that whenever you do anything tax related, try to file electronically. That nothing gets lost in the mail with that.
Yeah, but because we were delinquent, we weren't allowed to file electronically. We had to send everything through paper. So the only reason we knew
Oh,
that they actually received it was because we sent it certified. But other than
okay.
that, there's no communication from them whatsoever until they process your paperwork.
It does take a while to receive, I mean, forgetting the fact that it's nonprofit, but even for individuals, it takes forever going through the mail. Then you may, and then if forms are computer generated, you'll be receiving notices even though they have your information for processing. So it's pretty much a waiting game until everybody gets all of their ducks in order, and then one one part of their organization talks to the other to to get things straight. But I want to also, with that and saying late, if you do not file your 990 forms for 3 consecutive years, you will be automatically revoked, which means that your nonprofit will no longer be valid, which means that you will ultimately have to file again, do the entire process all over again. There may be some circumstances where you may be able to shortcut some of that, but you would ultimately have to go through some of the same, if it's been, depending on how long it's been since you filed the return, then you may have to go through the process all over again, which is very timely and very what's the word? Cumbersome.
For
Then
Adriana, um, I would also suggest, like, when I had issues with the IRS, like, my husband suggested I just call them, and they do have like a phone number, and there is like a special like nonprofit unit, and
yes,
they were able to kind of provide advice to me directly on the spot when I had a penalty. I had a very large penalty this last year, and they told me, I was looking to pay the penalty, and I didn't even know that I could, write a letter or reach out to them saying why I was unable to pay my taxes on time. And so, like, in writing that letter, like, my whole fee was abated, my penalty was abated. And so if you're having, unsure if they received, your correspondences, I would also just do my due diligence and just call them directly as well. They have a nonprofit unit. I'm going to try and find that number for you, but it's usually on the form as well, like any correspondence they send you.
right.
Um, I see
It may
Dawn.
take a few phone calls.
Yeah, and Adriana,
Yeah, it's not a one shot.
yeah, and reach out to them and see if it can be abated, like I had to write like a letter, and I blamed it on the pandemic, financial hardships as an organization. We're a new nonprofit, and they are like, okay. And we got rid of that penalty for me. And that was amazing. Because, small nonprofits, we don't have like the biggest budgets compared to like, the American Red Crosses of the world where we can just, pay that. And so like every little bit it counts. And I would just say, reach out to the IRS to see what can be done, um, like Patricia said, like put stuff in writing, but also call them, also email them, and just kind of, do that as well, like kind of cross all your T's. I saw that Dawn mentioned not having a succession plan from year to year. She's just become a treasurer for a senior citizen 501(c)(7) organization and has multiple state and federal filing delinquencies. Prior treasurers and other leaders had no idea what filing requirements are. I was an interim executive director for a huge nonprofit. And then coming into that role, I experienced the same situation where, there was all of these past fees and penalties, delinquencies. And it's like, how do you manage that, coming into taking on the role of in an organization that you're just becoming a part of. Patricia, do you have any advice, for that?
Okay, first of all, you're going to understand that you didn't create the situation, but the next point is to take a look at which years are involved and which state agencies you're late with, and then basically go through whatever records that you have in order to get those delinquencies taken care of. Once the returns are filed, then you can work through, okay, now, are there any penalties? If there's penalties, let's go ahead and again, request abatement. And in this situation, my suggestion would probably be something to the effect that, hey, I'm responding. So let's say I'm in that person's shoes and I'm getting this letter. You guys are delinquent. I'm going to first do that first thing, put the returns together saying, okay, I have the returns now. Secondly, take a look at the penalties. And then I'm going to draft that letter for the abatement. I'm going to say, you know what? I just joined this agency in this capacity right here. I have reviewed what we have. I don't have any additional information. I've requested information from the prior people. Because that's the other thing is that if they didn't have a succession plan, then if there's a way to contact the people who were in that spot before, then maybe they can add something there. But I would put all of that into the letter to the Internal Revenue Service. And then go from there and request the abatement. And what also I would add to that is that from this point on, this is what we're doing so that this won't happen again. And then send it to them. That would be my personal go-to for that. I can tell you that with the other nonprofits that I worked with, I know that theirs was a slightly larger organization, and they depended on volunteers to do everything. And the volunteers were not required to have any accounting experience. And so as a result, the books were horrible. And so they didn't file. Somebody got sick, somebody else left, they didn't have it, and so that was their thing. So, but the guiding principle for requesting the abatement, just tell them what happened. That's generally the easiest route to go. If they do, they do. You already know that even if they deny the abatement, then it's not over. You can still appeal that, and then after that, then you work to. If they deny the appeal, then you can still work to pay whatever it is. But get the returns filed as soon as possible. And then you said multiple state and federal, then you're also looking at, okay, is this more than 3 consecutive years? Because that's going to make a big difference on what you actually have to do. So with the Secretary of State, if it's been 3 or more, and the franchise tax board, if it's 3 or more consecutive years, you're suspended, which means that if you're just an organization that said, okay, we're a nonprofit, then you're no longer a corporation. Because that's what the Secretary of State does. The franchise tax board, the reason you're a nonprofit is that regular companies that register, regular corporations that register with the Secretary of State, they're paying $800 a year. That's the franchise tax. Being nonprofit, you don't have to do that. So you want to make sure that that you're saying, hey, this is what happened. This is what we're doing about it. And then this is how it won't happen in the future.
Yeah, succession planning is very, very important. And I think potentially having,
Right.
some
And
type
that,
of like plan, like what do they call them? Procedures in place, so it doesn't happen in the future. And that's also why, record keeping is tough. And I would, I'm a big, I like virtual, like online record keeping because I can always go back, and look at, you know, but, if someone leaves and they take their books with them, or as they said, the Rolodex with them, if they, it's very hard to get that information back. And so, maybe having like an online system, and it's also really important for nonprofits to create separation of duties. So if someone does leave, like, the organization does not fall completely apart, you know. Does anyone else want to share about nonprofits? Don mentioned many organizations, and I am now creating one for my current organization to have the book, which is Compendium of All Filings and Descriptions of Requirements. Okay. Right. Right. Like I said, creating those procedures, and and as nonprofits, we're our goal is to provide the service to the community in which we want to serve, and it's sometimes hard to kind of take a step back and say, oh, we need to create procedures for this, and happens to a lot of new nonprofits. And a lot of funders want to know, like, what is your separation of duties? And sometimes it's hard, especially when you're a team of like 3 people. But funders, as you start to unlock, you know, larger funding opportunities, they do look at those things, like, what are your separation of duties? How are you ensuring that not only one person has access to all the financials? And so that's really good that you're creating the book. I need the book. Dawn. Right.
So good. That's a good idea.
Absolutely. Awesome. Renee, Jayton, Linda, did you want to share?
Hi. Hey ladies, how you doing?
Hi.
Um, yeah, so this was a great presentation. One of the things that really got me was that $100 a day penalty. Maybe I read that wrong, but I was like, oh my goodness.
Well,
But
no, that's $100 a day if you receive more than, say, $1 million in revenue for the year. If it's under that,
oh,
then it's $20 a day.
okay. I was just stuck on 100. I was like, oh
Oh,
wait.
no, no.
But
Yeah.
okay. Well, one of the questions I had, because I have a nonprofit, um, and we were trying, I guess during the pandemic, when we filled it out initially, there is a marking on there where it says pretty much it determines you as a private foundation instead of a public 501c3. And right now we're trying to figure out how to change it to a public instead of being private, because that has really been hurting us to receive a lot of these grants out there that look at a nonprofit as a public instead of a private.
Okay, you may, going on, I'm gonna say I don't have the answer to that one. I would maybe double check with the Secretary of State and see if there's a form where you can simply change that, but now, and that, is that with the Secretary of State or with the Internal Revenue Service?
Yeah, is that a part of the letter you received from the IRS, your designation?
Yeah, let me think. Because I think, well, how we filled it out was the 1023 easy.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, okay, that's
that
with
was a form.
IRS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was the form that we created, and I guess from there they determined us of being a private foundation.
It could be because of a box that you may have checked on the form.
Yeah.
In any case, then it would just be a matter of contacting the Internal Revenue Service to see if there's any way to change that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the determination is based on the information you provided about the design and setup of your nonprofit. That's how they determine it. So as Patricia said, I would contact the IRS, particularly that nonprofit department. We have found it to be extremely helpful because you reach individuals and not an AI computer that can talk through, your forms and what you need to do to correct things. But you have to go to the IRS and have them undo that determination.
Okay. Thank you. That really helps.
And then after you do that, you've got to circle back around to the state of California. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
I see Renee put in the chat, go with the info you shared. It may be important to also emphasize that new California law for online fundraising platforms requires them to validate good standing with California charity registrations before they transfer funds. So California good standing is even more important now.
Yes,
Absolutely
it is.
right.
And that's one of the links that we put into the resource slide that addresses that directly. So
Right.
check that link out.
And
Yeah.
I've been a part of, let's see, one, two, probably 3 grant writings within the last year. And they all ask for the secretary, the DOJ's charity registration. They want to know, they want proof that you're exempt from the government. They want that registration form from the Attorney General's office. And then they want to see 990s.
Right. I use a platform, online platform, where if people go to my website, they can make, an anonymous donation. I use givelively.org. And I did fall out of good standing while, I changed my calendar year, that whole fiasco. I did fall out of good standing with the California DOJ Office of Charities. And so Give Lively reached out to me and they said, we are unable to transfer your funds because it shows that your Office of Attorney General Charities status is delinquent. And luckily for me, like a week later, it got, it got reinstated. So I was able to say, hey, it's reinstated. So they do look at that stuff for online fundraising platforms that, people use to raise funds. So, make sure that you're in good standing with not only the IRS, but as well as the state of California Franchise Tax Board and the Office of Attorney General. Very important. And then a lot of, you know, big funder, especially when it comes to local funds, county funds, city funds. Now they're asking not only to provide your 501c3 determination letter, they're also asking for they want to see your statement of information. They want to see that you're compliant with the franchise tax board. They ask for screenshots to show that you're current for the
Right.
Office of Attorney General. So it's important to make sure that, you're compliant across all levels.
Yeah, I think for me, that's the largest takeaway that I would like for you all to leave with. This is not about the 990. The 990 is simply a tool. It's a reporting tool that is connected to everything that Elizabeth and Patricia has been sharing with you. It's connected with the state of California, the Franchise Tax Board, Department of Justice, all of it. And they're tracking every single solitary thing that you do. They've actually modified over the years the 990 to make those connections. But the questions on the 990 today were not the questions on the 990 15 years ago. Everything is connected in this process. And that's why we gave you that step-by-step action plan to say, okay, before you even get to the 990, make sure you're in compliance with the IRS and state of California. Do that first. Because even if you file your 990 and those other things are not in compliance, they're going to kick you back. Okay. That is the biggest
And I've seen
takeaway.
that too.
It's not about taxes, right? We all have our issues with taxes, and wonderfully for nonprofits, you don't have to pay any, really, right? So then what is it really about? It's about reporting to the government how you use the money and your internal governance. And today it is about the impact that your organization is having using the money that you're receiving. It's a much larger picture. So I just want to encourage you all, take a moment, make sure you're in compliance with all of those different organizations, and then do what Patricia said. Now get your financial, make sure you have all your financial documents together, et cetera, and then move forward with the 990. Do not put developing the 990 first, because it's simply a tool. That's my biggest takeaway for you all. It's very important.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, is there any more questions, comments? You did a really good job, ladies, and thank you so much, Patricia. Let me share my presentation one more time. I wanted to share Patricia's contact information. Here we go. And I know that when does tax season start for you?
I am back on the payroll the middle of December.
Middle of December. So if people email your H&R Block email, will you get it after the fact when you come back?
I probably will get it after the fact. Otherwise, it may be there once I get into the office.
Okay. Once you get into the
I don't have
office.
access to that email when I'm not. I've got 8 weeks that I've got to take off.
Okay. Awesome. Well, is this the contact information you want to share?
If they want to send me, you can provide them my personal stuff or my other email address, that if they just need to send a question or something like that they want answered after this seminar, that's fine. So you
Okay.
can put that in the chat and they'll have that. That's fine.
I'll share that. I'm going to follow up with everyone who's RSVP to
Okay,
this.
that's
I'm
fine.
gonna share the slides,
That'll
the
work.
recording.
At least at that point, then I can see that every day and I don't have to log into 55 other different things to get it.
Okay. Awesome.
And please, if you can, I'm not sure, you may or may not have had time to fill out the survey. The survey is something that the County of San Diego is asking to be done after our workshops, because they want to understand the value of this training for the small nonprofit communities in San Diego. The more feedback that you can provide us, the better we can tell the story of how we're able to help you grow or not grow, the challenges, the solutions that we can also present to the county to continue building the type of training and education that you need. So please, if you can, take a moment. It should take you less than 3 minutes to fill out the survey, and we so appreciate that.
Well, I want to say thank you all for attending and participating. Thank you, Patricia, for providing your expertise. Thank you, Natasha, for your
Welcome.
leadership.
If anyone has specific questions or needs specific help or a consultation or something like that, then I'd love to provide that for them.
Mhm.
Just go ahead and send me an email and then we'll make some arrangements for that. That's fine.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.